I'm Jo.
And I'm Eryn.
So we're co-hosts of the Enneagram 8 podcast, and we're so excited to have Katherine Fauvre here, especially because we just spent a season on Tritype, and she is the reason we are able to do that. So Tritype is actually a 27-point personality system. It was coined and created by Katherine Fauvre. It's based on the theory that an individual uses 3 Enneagram types, not just one. These 3 types occur as one in each of the 3 centers of intelligence: the head, so that's 5, 6, 7, the heart, which is 2, 3, 4, and the gut, which is 8, 9, and 1, and are used in a preferred, continuously oscillating, descending stacking order, which create a new type unto itself with its own worldview, coping mechanisms, and defense strategies. One of those 3 types in an individual's tritype is the core, or the dominant type, and it represents the ego's preferred defense strategy. And it's in charge of the 3-type defense system. So we cannot wait to dig in, especially with regards to 8s.
Yeah, thank you for taking us on.
Sure, I'm happy to be here. I always love when the accurate information can come out. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Did you want to start?
So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you got into Tritype and how we can, I guess, get into Tritype?
Well, I'll just try to condense it.
Yeah.
I was made a manager at 20. They thought I was 29. And it was the first year they couldn't ask your age or when you went to college or any of that. And AIDS can be very age progressed.
Yeah.
Kind of be confident. And I had flown to Europe when I was 12, but I had to go to Newark, collect my luggage, get a cab, and then get over to Kennedy and fly to Switzerland by myself. No one helped me. No one got my luggage. Because 8s have that arrogant pride. We really like doing that sort of thing to prove we can do it.
And we like to be able to tell people after the tough thing that we did.
Yeah. So when they asked me, like, if I could travel, because this job required travel, I said, well, do you consider this as being able to travel? And then who could deny that? You could do it. Well, you could certainly do it hypothetically, 29. And they didn't find out my age until I wanted a day off. And they said, oh, my friends are giving me a big party. And they said, oh, is this the big 3-0? And I go, no, this is the big 2-1. But when they promoted me before this, they said that I took care of things. I took charge. I got things handled. I was efficient, took charge, but they wanted me to take management training classes because I needed finesse.
Finesse.
Now, I was in the cosmetic industry, and it's a pretty brutal industry.
Yeah.
And you do need finesse and to get orders passed. But I never had a problem because I was so straightforward and I always delivered on my word. But it made my counterpart and my counterpart in New York just a little uncertain of what I might do. Guess what type they were? So I took mass quantities of classes for the rest of my life. And as a result, I learned many, many typologies or way to work with people. And I integrated that with everything that I did. And I even certified with Myers-Briggs many years ago. But I found that the Enneagram answered a lot of things that people in the Myers-Briggs community were trying to name. But with both systems, in my opinion, what we don't want to do is overly describe a type, because people will always say, but I'm not that.
Yeah.
But I'm not that. But I'm not that, if they're cis.
Yes. Yeah.
And if time they'll say, well, I can be that.
Yeah.
You know, I've done that too.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, the 269 will say, well, I'm pretty sure I'm a 2, but how can I know for sure?
Mhm.
And people tease me because they think I'm just going after sixes. I'm not. I'm trying to help. Well, I guess I am going after them.
But
I'm
I'll
trying
validate your points.
I'm trying to help them because they can go years without knowing their correct type. And it's heartbreaking because if they just had that formula, their anxiety would have gone down earlier. They wouldn't have to try and mistype as other types and keep changing it, because it's better to go with the idealized image, the core fear, and the defense strategy. Now, passions, fixations, convictions, holy ideas and virtues and holy convictions, those are all important, but not for typing. You only need those three for typing. So having said that, when I did my first body of research, it was in 1994, after I attended the first Enneagram conference. It was before the IEA. In fact, the IEA was born out of that conference. And I realized there was a very large cross-section of people who knew the Enneagram. I think there were like 1,300 people, maybe more or a little less, but definitely those who studied with different schools of thought. So to me, that was magic because I'd already done research on empathy and taught it to those who reported to me because I wanted everyone to have a chance. I taught them personal empowerment, and like the buyer of the store would say, wait, Katherine, what did you do in that training? Oh, I'm teaching them sell-through. And she said, but they're talking about personal empowerment. I said, yeah, if you feel empowered, you can sell what you believe in. And the way to believe in it is to know it and understand it. So she said, okay. But what I'm trying to say is that led me on this path of wanting to know more and more and more. But at that conference, I got a bunch of emails from people. I saw the difference between those that had learned the Enneagram through one channel and those who'd learned through another, those who knew some of the subtypes and those who knew nothing about the subtypes. And as a result, we organized the first IEA conference, and I was on that committee around these differences. And what came out of that was that we absolutely had to include Naranjo's subtypes to get the subtleties.
Mhm.
Otherwise, anyone that was emotional would be placed at 4.
Mhm.
Right.
And because if you go with the overly stereotyped types, and if 8 has 4 in the tritype, they'd be made a 4. And if 8 had 6, they'd be made a 6. So it really, really is critical to understand the tritype and the subtypes.
Yeah.
And that's how much came into being. So when I saw that, I realized that I had to keep going. It wasn't just the one study, which was originally the internal experience of type. And I had been teaching like 9 years then later when I met Naranjo. I had 3 certifications, 3 studies, 2 books, and then I met Naranjo. And then I came back and he filled in all the blanks because he had a lot to do with the details that Erika had. It wasn't Erika when he was with them. It was just Oscar Ichazo. But having said that, what I noticed was that if you didn't understand the structure and really the definitions of these different ways of looking at the Enneagrams, then you'd miss the most important thing. And it's not what you do, but why you do it. And you have to see evidence of the defense strategy. So it's very natural to mistype for that reason, especially if you're a 6 or a 9.
Right. Well, given that we run an 8 podcast, would you just take us through what would you look for in an 8? What is what are the hallmark idealized image, the core fear and the defense strategies that you would pinpoint? You'd go, yeah, that's 8.
Well, the first thing you would notice is an easy, arrogant pride. It's not like a pump up, arrogant pride. It's more, yeah, I enjoyed doing that. And I did this.
Do you know what I call it? Big cat energy, like a lion. Like, they're there and they're taking up space, but they're lounging. Yes.
It's a good way to do it. In fact, I had a little card that was given to me with this cat that had a gold chain on and was playing cards. And another one was a little boxing kitty that had a pink hoodie on. And I love pink hoodies and with boxing gloves. And people give me those types of cards.
Right.
It's like in an archetypal way, we know how we relate to people and how they impact us. We don't always know the way we impact others, but they certainly have an idea. Whether they're accurate or not in their interpretations, another story, but they'll see the behavior. But having said that, you're right, but it's nonchalant.
Yeah.
There's no explaining. Like if someone needs to explain, no, wait, let me give you several paragraphs why I'm on this podcast or why I need to have this session. And they're showing any agitation like this. Another way is that if they have this,
the like quirked eyebrow.
you can check next, but you can just be a sad person, and you can have the imprinting genetically sad generations, or there's also bone structure. But for the muscles to do this, you had to have experienced sadness.
Yeah.
Or there's a 9 in the Tritype or a 9 wing, because it doesn't exist. And the 6s they'll do this. What? I'm not sure. Maybe. Oh. And they do it so much, it's like a caterpillar walking across their face. And why is that? Because just like any other muscle,
so good.
if we develop it, it stays developed. It might not be as good, like when I teach micro expressions.
And maybe not appropriate.
Kind of practicing some of these gestures because I don't use them. But disgust, I never have to work on that. Because disgust is the most common emotion that can be seen on the face of an 8. And the way Ichazo taught type 8, he called the whole system proto-analysis. It wasn't called the Enneagram. Naranjo changed it to the Enneagram to differentiate and not violate Ichazo's copyright. This is what Naranjo told me anyhow. And I think it's true, because when I met with the Eurekans and went to that intensive and lived on Maui for a year, they were all in agreement with that he had never violated any of Ichazo's copyright. So back to what I'm saying, there's just a way that the 6 will double check, and the counterphobic 6 will mistype as an 8, but they hesitate first, and they know their tendency to submit, and they don't like it. So they go all tough. Like my best friend is a 6, and when she's stressed, she's counterphobic, she'll start kind of like knowing what she's going to do. And I go, okay, what's going on with tough girl? And that's another hallmark of 8 is we tease, and it's actually endearment.
Yes.
We don't bother teasing people we have no use for.
No way.
So it's really helpful to understand that. We don't have the witty sarcasm
Mhm.
of the 7 or the self-deprecating humor of the 6. We have our own kind of humor depending on our instinct.
And it's kind of like some people can't take it, right? It's
Oh, I'm gonna say I run into a lot of problems with my 1s.
yeah, they're too
attacked,
serious.
and
Yeah,
I'm
they're too
not
serious.
being serious. Like
Yeah.
it is endearment for me. Like you said, I wouldn't waste my time.
Yeah.
They weren't important.
Why waste the energy?
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
just move on to something more interesting.
And even my humor feels like roughhousing. Like it's a really even a blunt kind of humor.
Yeah.
And some people literally feel like I'm manhandling them with my humor.
I teased my sister about
Yeah.
things before that I'm totally not like that are completely untrue. And she will turn it to me and say, you are saying those things because deep down you believe that's true. And I'm like, no, I'm really not.
You're
I
overthinking
promise.
I just was being funny.
Yeah.
They think there's a deep-seated feeling, and I understand why people would project that on to the 8. What's confusing is the 8 has like a resting face that looks like, don't mess with me. You're gonna regret messing with me anyhow. We don't have that like resting smile face.
I have to try. I have to really work at it if I want to
can't even do
present
it.
as
It
safe.
looks
Yeah.
stupid on me.
And it hurts. My smile muscles hurt because
See, I
if
think
it's
that's-
not genuine, it actually hurts
I
me.
think with the social piece, it's easy.
Yeah, no, it is, because the social instinct of 8 is looking for friends and foes.
Yes.
And are you, if you're not for me, you're against me.
Yeah.
So the unaware 8 is saying, yeah, out, because you have to be for me or
Right.
you're a problem. And you can go do whatever you want, just we can't be in relationship. Now, when 8s learn about the Enneagram, they realize that part of themselves. And the sexual 8 is always looking at how to create closeness, because the sexual instinct wants closeness.
Oh yeah.
According to Naranjo, the sexual has merged kind of closeness and love, sex, love. It's not enough to just enjoy a good dinner or a great conversation. It has to be meaningful. Now, people say, wait a minute, that's 4. Well, he wasn't wrong, because 2 years later, I ran a study just on intimacy. And I'll be darned, the 8s who knew nothing of what Naranjo and I had talked about all said some version of what did they want in intimacy. Long discussion, deep discussion.
Mhm.
And then when I interviewed them, they shared it's because the other stuff is just doesn't mean anything. So it's not like the 4, I must have meaning. But if you're an 8 with 4 in the Tritype, that matters. But the 8 just wants to get at the root of something.
Yeah.
And understand what makes people tick. And you do not have to be asexual for that. It's just 8s. They're curious about people, not like a head type. It's like, okay, what happens if I kind of push on that? It's just like, it's a physical curiosity.
The biggest thing I noticed the difference between us is we both don't do small talk, but I want to make connections. So when I'm meeting new people, I can't small talk with you. I will go right into real things, but I'm always looking for a common connection. Did you, oh, your kids go to school here. Oh, you live here. I know these people. Do you know these people? Right. There's always that connection. And then we can get into real conversation.
I'm like, how's your soul? I want to know your soul.
Well, here's what's really important is that the socials are best at the interview overview.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what you just described, where what do we share in common? Common ground, commonality. And socials want a bond as well. But the sexuals are talking about a whole different kind of bond,
Yeah.
pair
Yep.
bonding,
Yes, yes.
matching.
Call it fusing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I've never worked well in a group. It was always just one friend that I was very close to at a time. Yeah, always.
And a lot of times the 8 likes lots of people because it's stimulating, but the head type can vary as to whether or not that's true, or the Myers-Briggs type and what you grew up with. All these things are important. But having said that, the 8 usually has sexual 8, that close friend, and then you kind of go as a pair to these different events or the group event. Even if you go talk to other people,
Mhm.
met your friend there. It's
Yeah,
gives,
that
it's
was me
not
as a kid.
real
Yeah,
till a
for sure.
sexual subtype talks about it with an intimate.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's fascinating. Good points, both of you, because you've just described the friendly bond based on common ground of the social, and you just described what the sexual needs, and then what self-pres needs is comfort.
Hmm.
So with respect to 8, the self-pres 8 is focused on like their stuff. And if they like beautiful stuff because they have 3 or 4 in the Tritype, then they have magnificent things. And if they have the money, and they have all the stuff that we would assign to type 3. And 3s could have it too. But with the 8, it's about freedom and enjoying the good life and going and doing and having everything you want when you want it. Now, 3s do it because it's part of their image. And if the 8 has 3 in the Tritype, there'll be definitely versions of that where you can even think there are 3, but if you listen to the words they use, the lexicon, like that early research I did with my staff. Now, mind you, that staff, in a flow chart was over 1,000 people. So I actually worked with many people and could run all these studies, which you'd think would be atypical for the cosmetic industry. And it was. I never intended to be in the cosmetic industry. I fell into it. Long story. But I got out of it as soon as I could. I still was in there for a long time. And a sexual 874 was promoted to be the head of Lancôme, L'Oreal, Nestle, that whole conglomerate. And he saw what I did and some events that I created. So when he took over, he came and visited the US, came to our conference, and then he wanted to check a couple places in the country. But then when he heard about what I was doing with personal empowerment and with the color there, you give me a system, any system, and I'm going to be interested. He came out to San Francisco and he sat through the whole thing. It was amazing. And he later became known for that. But he said to the US boss, so you got to get her to come to New York. And he said, yeah, no, we've asked her. She won't leave. Her son, she has a young son. And her husband had a law practice. And he said, oh, we'll get him a firm. Of course, that was not what my husband wanted to hear. But anyhow, he said, no, we've offered that too, because it's so much like Hollywood that they do have those connections.
Yeah.
Like when I'd go to dinner, I had to go to New York every month. And when we'd go to dinner with my US boss, we'd be in exclusive little places where they'd custom make and keep wines just for them. And then in that room, it wouldn't be very big, but there'd be filled with famous people.
And
So
you probably weren't impressed. You were probably not impressed or starstruck in any way. I know. Nope. We're immune.
It's more socials that are tracking the hierarchy.
Yeah.
But what I was tracking is, wow, this is power. You can get what you want when you want. Your wine is there, your whatever is there. Whoops.
Yeah.
That was impressive to me, but the people weren't. In fact, I met a lot of them because they all went to the same restaurants. So they knew each other. And they could just show up by themselves and sit at the same table.
Right.
Like one time, we had one famous person, another time, another famous person. And it was intriguing to see them in their own element rather than acting the persona, because we all have personas.
Yeah.
So another thing that's important is to understand countertypes. And that's how people mistype as 8. And with the 3 instinctual types of 8, there's one, what I called stereotype, and Naranjo then called archetypes. So he noticed beginning in late 71, when he started teaching the Enneagram himself and his SAT groups, just a small part of his SAT groups, he noticed that there were certain qualities that would give him a snapshot of a type. So if someone came in cynical and making expressions and doubting, he would know they were 6 right away. And like at the IA conference in 2004, he said he would teach if he could have the whole conference, that he wanted to do more research because he hadn't written his book yet. And when he validated my subtype research, he said, and Katherine, put in a paragraph from me in your book. And I said, you want me to put material you haven't published in my book? He said, yeah, I want to be represented because I had given credit to everybody. Wherever I found anything, I gave credit. And so I said, okay. But I sent it to him to make sure I hadn't made any errors because I didn't want any more errors like integration, disintegration, which was a misunderstanding that went around the world. But having said that, as a result, we talked about countertypes because I asked Naranjo, I said, had he noticed that there was a stereotype of each type, overly simplified, by the way, we all know them, and 2 countertypes, but that they were in a stacking order. So during my research, that first body of research, it was on the internal experience of type, but I was trying to understand subtype. I started to notice that many people really identified with 3 types. It was just too frequent. And I wanted to think, oh, they just don't know how to type themselves.
Yeah.
And that can happen with the 6 or 9, but they would also have people telling them, no, you're a 3. No, you're a 6. No, you're a 9. But what was noteworthy, it was never the same center.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was doing my research, I found that when there could be 4 possible types, but the 2 that were in the same center were generally the wing they identified with. But when there were lexicon use, adjectives, defense strategies, and mechanisms of a type they had no connection to, I knew it was meaningful. And what most people do not know is that the Enneagram was taught as a trialectic system rather than dialectic. And that's why you can't have one wing or the other. You always have both. You have your type and the wing and back and wing and back and wing and back. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously, it's also going to this line and back and this line and back. And in total, that makes 9. Everything, it's a 9-fold pattern. So it looks like a piston. I can't do it at once, but it's going. Mm-hmm. And if you just can imagine it, it's what propels the types on this continuum. And if you think of it as a globe rather than a flat surface, it makes it better. But back to countertypes, the obvious stereotype of 8 is the self-pres 8. Nobody disagrees. But sometimes the strong 5 that has 8 in the tritype will think they're the self-pres 8 because in the early definitions that were actually incorrect were 5s or 6s that thought they were 8s. And what we have to look at is the career. Like, what do they do? And why do they do it? And there can be people with 8 in the tritype that can seem like an 8, but 8s are very, 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 very rarely an introvert. And when they are, it's just a few points. It's not like a real, the function isn't really far apart. You still need to go with those few points when you settle on the MBTI, but I could go into a whole nother thing about that, and I won't, because they also are overly describing what the MBTI types are, and as a result, people can't find themselves. Whereas 30 years, 40 years ago, when I was teaching it, it was easy to see these differences, and now it's gotten complicated. So with the self-pres 8, they just kind of want their stuff, and they're really, they could be the owner of a junkyard and be and just have their nuts and bolts and they wouldn't care. Or they could be on the Riviera. And I've known both, and they really care about how they dress and how they look. And that can just be a vanity gene. You do not have to lead with a heart type to care about your appearance, because just like the warrior gene and the empathy gene, there are factors or childhood intelligence, all these things are going to be much more available to us. So we'll put the self-pres 8 aside, but the stereotype is the big masochistic self-pres 8. And there are self-pres 8s that aren't big.
Yeah.
But they're, you don't want to mess with them, I'll tell you that much. And they're, you know, kind of affable in their own way, but they're grumpier. They're like, but then they'll really do extraordinary things. Like I had a client that everyone didn't know what she was. And then when I came to her, I mean, I knew she was a self-pres 8. And I said, share with everybody how you are generous with your resources and supplies, but your rules around it. And she said that she had an open cabinet policy, that she would have plenty of goods, meaning flour, rice, the essentials. And if someone needed something, they could go and take it. But if they ever took advantage, nope, you can't get any more.
Yeah.
And it's just so matter of fact. And they're not as gregarious, they're not as interpersonal, but they're good people. And they can be quite funny. Okay, so we'll put them aside. Now, the counter type that's the most obvious with the 8 is the social, because they're looking for alliances. And you have to befriend a lot of people to have enough resources. I have one friend that when I met him in the Enneagram community, in the little phone, he had, I think at that time, maybe 4,000 people, their type, their Tritype, their wing, and their instinct, all in there. And then everybody on their birthday that was on Facebook, he'd write an email.
That's committed.
So they're friendly. They want positive rapport. The way they look at it is if they need something, he happened to have self-pres in there too. If he needed an architect, there'd be one in there. If he needed a party person that did, there'd be a person in there for that. And also getting a deal, because eights come in
Oh,
two.
you were about deals. She's about deals.
But it's the connections, right? It is the connect.
It's based on
someone-
the rapport that you
Mhm.
have. Because actually the word connection's one of the tougher words, because all twos want connection. All sexuals want connection. We're just describing it differently.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
And the two is trying to be in positive rapport with everyone. So they use it the most.
Mm.
But the friendly bond, social bond, is what the social eight wants. But you're a friend until you cross them. Then you become the foe. And everyone's a friend or a foe. You're either in the circle of care or you're out of the circle of care.
Yeah.
And they're just an obvious variable from the stereotype of the kind of grouchy, self-present. Now, the sexual eight is a countertype too. And let me go back up why this is important. The self-pres eight has the fear of the eight, which is of being betrayed, controlled, manipulated, and at the mercy of injustice. So let's just say that's all eights. But with self-pres, it combines with fears of not having enough resources, not having food, shelter, clothing, time, energy, and money. And that's why it's shaped that way and they match. And the center itself is self-pres. So we get when someone is like a heart type and they're a sexual heart type because they match, and it's social in the head center because that matches. What people don't know is that Naranjo based his subtypes on Ichazo's definition of the centers. Now, he used the word instinctual triads for this centers themselves. Naranjo didn't. Why? Didn't want to violate his copyright. So Naranjo went and used universal in the public domain terms. And he used the Enneagram because Gurdjieff, it was out there, the symbol dated back to antiquity. No one could own that. And that's why the proto-analysis was not used, but also why he came up with using Ichazo's very specific way of looking at these three triads. So Naranjo hypothesized with all these people that had issues and struggles that were more than just their ego type. So what was taught about the Enneagram is your ego type, and there were names for each one of those based on what you do. And so the 2 was ego flat, which meant ego flattery, meaning how can you make sure people like you? Because the 2 needs to be liked. The 2, 6, and 7 don't feel right if they're not liked. So they flatter. It's the quickest way to build rapport with someone. And it doesn't have to be sickening flattery. It's a very good defense strategy. More people need to have it. I had to learn to do it because I think, oh, they already know. Oh, that looks nice. No big deal.
Yeah.
But for some people, it is a big deal and they need to hear it. So I taught myself to notice or say it if I noticed rather. So with the social, it's that same fear, betrayal, being controlled, manipulated, and harmed at the mercy of injustice, combined with the social fear of being cast out, unacceptable, without merit. And biologically, we have a biological imperative to dread that and feel incredibly anxious because it meant certain death. You didn't have the shared protection of the group. You wouldn't have something over your head if you were cast out. So it's very real for each instinctual type, because they all go back to biological imperatives. Like the self-pres is worried about what could happen to their body. The social is worried about whether and how they would survive without the benefit of others. And people say, oh, well, I'm antisocial. You can still be social because it's where your attention goes. And then last but not least is the countertype in 8 of the sexual. So the 8s focus on betrayal, the mercy of injustice, being harmed, controlled, or manipulated, merges with the need for union fusion, to be one with your mate, to dissolve boundaries like the gut boundaries and be one. Now, you can look at all of these in terms of the words that Naranjo applied to each instinct. Self-pres, satisfactory survival. That's double survival issues. Social, then it's, he liked to call the social the soapbox activist, but even 9s can do that. Be quiet and easy, and then suddenly they're triggered, and then they say something and they seem like an 8, and then they go quiet again. But with the 8, friends and foes gives a really good picture of where the attention's going. With sexual, on the other hand, it's called possession surrender. So the dichotomy, and in one way, it could even be a stronger countertype, because how do you hold on to autonomy, which is what the 8 needs, and surrender control to another person? Well, you'd have to really, really be in sync with that person.
Yeah, that's why it's so rare. It's so rare. I talk a lot with our 8s about how heartachy it is, because you're longing for, I call it like an energy that people give off. And when you find it, because it almost never happens, you want it so much. And sometimes you can't have it because either you're already paired and you happen to have found a boy that's a friend and you can't bond with them that way. So we had a few 8s with that problem. Or it's a girlfriend who then moves across the country, and it kind of breaks your heart because it doesn't come around very often.
And the sexual's looking for the same wavelength. And so wherever the sexual, and it's just amplified with 8, because the 8 needs a lot of closeness. You can't have it be just one person either, because you can't be left without. So there's usually a point person wherever you are.
Yeah.
They might not be the top point person.
Yeah.
But like in every business I would go into, there'd be someone where we could shut the door and then talk about real things.
Exactly. I'm the hub. I'm the common denominator, and then there's spokes.
Yeah. And so it's looking for that Nini.
Yes.
Nini. When it's not there, like I once did this course, it was a small number of people, but there wasn't a single sexual subtype. And I thought, it makes a difference. So I called my friend. I tell my friend what I was experiencing, whereas normally in an intensive, there's someone that's kind of on the same wavelength. So that's why there are 2 countertypes. And it just was that one situation at that conference where people got the impression there was only one. And then other times he might mention a countertype here, a countertype there, but he never formally went into disseminating them that way. But I just wanted to say that because it makes a huge difference with 8s, because the sexual 8 is like, what? you care about that kind of closeness. And the social 8, okay, that they can kind of get that because the social 8 can want to hold court.
Yeah, we started to learn a little bit about the triads, the Hornavian, and there was a few. There were 3 different triads. The reaction triad. I'm not sure who coined those, but that's where we started to see. Okay. They show the amplification really well, because then you see how if you have all 3 rejection numbers, my goodness, right? And so some of the tritypes are triple rejection. Some of them are,
Yeah, just like that's one of the courses I teach.
Yeah, so good.
Triple focus. And really,
that.
what it's mentioning is so important, because with your tritype, it's like what comes together. And what people did not understand about tritype is they thought they just had to choose a type in each center that they identified with or related to. No, you might not even see what you're doing.
That was when, at the beginning of our podcast, I trityped as an 8-2-7. And then as we learned more and more, and I used language and we spent a lot of time together, Jo kept saying, this is not 2 this is 3 language. I'm like, yeah, this is 3 language.
Well,
Maybe
I'm going to throw something out. I see the social language, which is very 3-ish, by the way, but I'm seeing the 2.
Oh yeah, well, maybe.
Because you keep talking about connection.
Right.
And the social subtype, and here's the other thing that evolved in my research, is that I wanted this really elegant, you'd have one type, you'd have the stacking of your types and the stacking of your instincts, and then there would be one instinct. It was a pipe dream. Once you know all the basics, you can see wonderful patterns. So it'd be social 8. And then if you were 3, you'd have to relate to social 3, not the other 3s. Social 2 is one of those anomalies where they're really strong, dynamic people, and they were left out of the dissemination of the Enneagram.
Oh, they're interesting.
Poof, gone. And they need to be brought back in. Because if you look around, like, where are the 2s? They're not just chaplains and people that are subservient to others. They're strong, dynamic people.
I guess that's the part I don't relate to, is the need to constantly do for other people, right? Like, if you're in my circle, you're in, and I will move anything to do whatever you need. But if you're not, I'm not interested in just looking for the people who are in need. Like, you're way better at that. I'm like, what's the group, right? Like, where's the group dynamic of some group that needs help, and I will jump in a very big way. But I'm not, unless you're in my circle, the one-on-one isn't important to me.
Yeah, and the sexual is very different from the social. But if you look at the social 7, the social 8, and the social 2, and then the tritype bringing out that, what you see is the 8 is strong. The 7 is more of willing to, in order to get acclaim and validation and affirmation, they will do something. They'll work hard. So they're called the martyr, but they're not like a martyr. Really, martyr is more the unhealthy 2 that's saying, well, I did this. But every type is wonderful and every type's a mess. It's just what kind of wonderful and what kind of a mess. So if you, like, in terms of the triple focus, if we take the 3-7-8, for example, you lead with 8, and I called them the mover shaker. Now, the names are important too, because what happened is people like names. And I hypothesized 27 different names based on what I saw. And then without them knowing it, I asked people to tell me what name they related to for their tritype. And they'd send in names. And when they described something like a can-do person, mover shaker, we were good. But if the 3 didn't like that word and they wanted something else, and the 7 didn't like that word, it was a problem. So the one word that all 3 types would agree on with the 3, 7, 8 was the mover shaker. Now, just as a point of reference, if you look at the 2, 7, 8, that's someone that follows their own muse. Now, the social wants to see what's happening with others, and you want them to join you. But if it comes down to it, the 8, 7, 2, yeah, they'll be kindly towards others and they'll kind of try to get things to go their direction, but they still want to go do what they want to do. And because the 8 is innately autonomous, that's the foundation. You can't be governed by others. You want to be self-determining. You want to be master and commander of your own world. You will totally pursue what you want. It'd be nice as a social to have people do it with you, but you're not going to not want to do the things you want to do. And that's an important distinction, because a lot of 6s that think they're 8s would say, oh no, I just have to be with my friends, or no, that'd be too uncomfortable. Or, and then you start to hear the language that's used, like what I saw overall. Now they're the free spirit, so is the 4, 7, 8. What's different is the 2 kind of knows how to navigate around people better than the 4, 7, 8.
Yeah.
And it's a fundamental difference between 2 and 4. So when 4 is added to 7 and 8, you get triple creative. When 2 is added to 7 and 8, you get a triple manipulative. And it doesn't mean negative manipulation.
No, I can understand that.
That whole thing happened, and it shouldn't, because in cultures other than the US, especially Latin cultures, they think someone that can get around people's issues so that everyone feels their needs are met is the greatest strength you can have. So they put the 2 up here.
Right.
Now, having said that, the 8 is like considered the person you want when you want to fight, when you want someone to fight for your land rights, or it's very different. But because manipulative was made bad, people didn't realize that every single type is manipulative. We have to be.
Yeah.
You know, the minute we're concealing something about ourselves, we're manipulating. We just don't want to own it. That's human nature.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to learn as little children how to lie. And we have to learn to be good at it and not get caught, because it could be the difference between life and death.
Yeah.
If, you know, a warrior tribe or someone unfriendly, or a person that was unfriendly, was going to take advantage of you. If you knew how to lie successfully, you could say an untrue and then be safer. So everything has meaning. But so the other thing about the 2, 7, 8 is they're relational, and they're free in their thinking. They're more of a libertine, and because they all have access to 2, like the 8 has a line to 2, 2 has a line to 8, and the kind of opposing elements that went on to become harmonics, but the way I learned them is dichotomies, is that 2 and 7 are the connection dichotomy. And that's another reason that you might be saying 2 words like connection. Because if you have both, it just becomes a part of your vocabulary.
Right.
And if you consider that 2 is not understood, really not understood. So
That's-
when you have the lines to 2 naturally, and you have 7 in the tritype, there's more of that. Are we connecting, not connecting? But the social governs how you want that connecting to be. And then the other thing is that the 7 brings this desire for enjoyment, and 7s consciously manipulate. Oh, come on, it'll be more fun.
We don't do
Yeah,
that.
I'll do this or I'll do that. And they can just kind of get people to do things. And
Yeah.
then do you relate to that? And then
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last but not least is, of course, the 8 takes charge. And since every one of these 3 types has access to 8, it's a very protective tritype. And people don't get it because they just look at my little mini definition and they think that if I use the word passive, that they're weak and pathetic. No, passive is
Right.
a lot of power. And if I say aggressive, then they think the person's like over the top. No, they're just showing their aggression. But all of us do it. Everyone's aggressive. It's just how are we going to do it? And so with the 4, 7, 8, also a free spirit, but there's more of a need to create, a need to change. Like the 4, 7, 8 is the change element in the Enneagram. And they like the word messenger, and I agree, even as one, because whatever we learn,
You have to say it.
we have to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
Whether they want to hear it or not.
Yes.
And we find the way to say it.
Yeah.
So that it lures people in, especially if you're the sexual instinct.
Yeah.
And then if we very quickly look at the other ones, the 2, 5, 8, on the other hand, all 8s are strategists, but they're triple rejection. I'm going to change it and say not rejection the way people think. It's not wanting to give up your autonomy. And all 3 types want to govern their own world. So they'd rather be rejected than conform. 2s don't conform, 8s don't conform, and 5s don't conform. So it's really in the beginning when Ted and Kathy came up with which types would be rejection, they were right by center. But as individual types, we have to change the wording because it's will you give up your autonomy? And those 3 types won't.
Yeah.
And then if we look at the 2, 6, 8, it creates this hero because there's a kind of a rescuer too. They'll know they're that way. And I'm not talking about the way the 2 rescues, however, 2's in the tritype. So it's woven in. And well, they're triple protecting. If 6 is in a tritype with 8, the 6 automatically becomes counterphobic. It cancels out the phobic side. Now, does that mean that they're never phobic? No. But as a general rule, all 6s have moments of phobia and counterphobia. But people used to say, well, why is someone more counterphobic than the other? It's the tritype and the instinctual type. So if you have an instinctual type that is sexual and you have a tritype that is stronger, especially like the 3, 6, 8, which I'll lead into right now, it's the kind of myopic 8 because they want their team and the 8 wants to be the team leader, but they want a cohesive group. If you think about special forces, they train and train and train to be a unit so that they can operate as one. doing different things, and they have each other's back. Now, if you have a counterphobic 6 that is a 6-3-8, they can seem like an 8. And if they're sexual, they really seem like the 8. The stereotype definition sounds exactly like the 8-6-3.
Yeah.
So that's why the 3s and the 6s mistype as 8s.
Whereas the most unflattering stereotypes sound like the 8-6-4.
Well, that's my fault. Because I didn't say enough
Oh,
about what the emotions were, and people just put it like anyone that's emotionally out there
yeah.
is the 8-6-4. Not so. I have a son who's an 8-6-4, and boy, he's intense, no question. And if you say something off, it's like, say what?
Yeah.
He'll do that. And I go, no, I was talking about that. He'll go, oh, never mind. And it just changes on a dime. But if someone's unhealthy, they're going to emotionally voice what's going on. And if they're an extrovert, that voice is going to be loud.
Yes.
If they're an introvert, then they're still going to voice it. Having said that, it's another stereotype, because 4-6-8s are an interesting combination. It's the most emotional 8, because the 4 and 8 have the line of intensity. There's a quality in all 3 types where they're the fundamental visceral type of each center. So the 4 is the visceral heart type, the 6 is the visceral head type, and the 8 is the visceral of the visceral types. So it's immediate.
We do these like rapid fire questions at the end of the interviews, and one of them is what makes you cry. And interestingly, the 8-6-4s say everything. It's private. They do it privately, but it's like they let out. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah. So they feel so many feelings.
That's not my experience. Having said that, though, they can be deeply touched by something, and kind of be choked up, especially as children. Like if there was a movie with an animal that was separated from its mother, they would cry. But after, puberty, no.
Which 8s cry the most?
None of them.
Okay.
It's part of the defense strategy to not give someone the power to hurt you. So if you cry, you're thought of as weak.
Would it be fair to say, as you get healthy, though, the tears become more accessible? Yeah.
It's more that you're more comfortable with your emotions. It doesn't have to be tears. You honor your tender emotions, but it's still not common for an 8.
I would say that's more accurate for me. Like I can feel my feelings more. I can sit in them longer, but tears are not accessible easily for me unless I'm exhausted. Then they're fine.
And when the 8 will cry as a child and maybe as an adult is if they're really frustrated
or humiliated. For me, it's
disempowered. There's nothing they can do.
Yeah,
that happens as a child, and it'll shame the 8 no end. Like if they're misrepresented, the 8 just can't tolerate that, and they're told they can't say what happened. They're furious, and if you can't say anything, it's like, oh, and you usually say something.
What is that? Something you see often with the 8-4-7, like Jo says that when she's embarrassed, you get angry first.
Yeah, but I'll never do it in front of anyone.
No, but you do cry.
But that's the anger at being humiliated burns.
I don't have that. Like humiliation.
Yeah. Well, humiliation is an important part of it. And you should have it, actually. What I would invite
maybe I hide it.
Is to find the way you renamed it in your your own.
You know what it is? It's when the group that I'm part of or the group that I created pushes me aside.
Yeah.
That'll be my spot. Yeah.
Yes.
That would be my humiliation. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be ultimate humiliation, would it not?
But I just see it. I do. Yeah. I think, again, I just get angry. So it's just anger to me.
Yeah. And what we do about it is part of our defense. And it's also, anger is like an anesthesia. If we're in anger, we're not feeling the pain. So any type could potentially go into anger, but for how long? And if you get in an 8 space, it's a big mistake. Like Helen made the mistake of saying, yeah, if you're dealing with an 8, just get in their face back. I go, no, Helen, you're married to an 8. That makes sense. But other people, if they get into an 8 space,
No.
if the adrenaline is triggered in anyone, you don't want to get in their face.
Mhm.
She was right. She had an adorable husband, so that's what she did with him. But so
I think it'd be fair to say our husbands can probably do that to us.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. No one else.
Maybe. With the unaware 8s, probably not if they're married to a 269, but they'll get kind of strong in their moments, and they won't really. The biggest thing with 269 is they absolutely do not know that they're manipulating for an outcome, and they hate learning it. But once they do and realize it's normal to manipulate, they can start to see what they're doing.
Right.
And that there's something like that for every type. But with the 368, the justice fighters, what I was talking about, they're confronting. Whereas the 468 is emoting and confronting simultaneously. The 368 takes great pride in that nothing phases them. They could be interrogated or.
Oh, I would like that superpower. I said I would like that superpower to like not let everybody know what I'm thinking at the moment.
They have to train for it, actually, because the 6 in there has to learn mind over matter. But once they do, and they have dedication from the other people on the team, they really do move as one. So if they make great trial attorneys, anything where you're fighting for justice.
Right.
And so that's why it matches the stereotype of 8. The 3 and 8 are both focused on results. So when they come together, it's more results oriented. 458 is really just the emotionally argumentative 478. It's just the 5 versus the 7 brings a greater desire to get the data and to win an argument. Whereas the 7 in the Tritype says, yeah, I don't want to waste my time on argument.
Boring.
Exactly. But the 458s, they'll get all their arguments down and they kind of like to stir it up. Like sometimes a 458 will want to challenge me on something like on Facebook. And I go, I just like to talk about what I enjoy. Well, I don't think you're right about this. Actually, I don't say that. Well, you don't? I go, no, that's not how I teach the Enneagram.
They're like, you're no 5.
I'll share anything I've learned and then you can do whatever you want.
Yes.
But I don't want it. Whereas some people love it.
But isn't that the point? Like that's the point, right? For us, the 8s.
What is
to share what we know? Like we want to go and empower others, right?
And it's usually the 458 that wants to stir it up, not the 854.
Right.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting.
It's fascinating because the order, like
it matters a lot.
And sometimes the 8 becomes softer. So if the 8 has 4 in the Tritype, they're softer than an 8 that doesn't.
Yeah.
And whereas an 8 with 3, no, remember they're It's always good for me to have the chance to say more about the Tritypes, because if you haven't been in my class, you're going to see this written all over Personality Cafe, and someone could be a borderline and be called. And then they think they're a 4, 6, 8 based on one little example. And what I was trying to show is that the sexual 4 was left out of the dissemination of the Enneagram. And when I met Naranjo, he talked about it and explained the intensity. He even changed Hitler from a 6 to a 4.
Wow, haven't heard that before.
Yeah, it's been that way since
Wow.
1996. So it's just that everyone didn't get the same data at the same time. Like if you happen to go to a conference and I was talking about it, you would have heard from me, but not others. People don't realize that he said, how could I not see it? And he was interviewed by Jessica on Shift Network, and I think 2017, and he mentions it there that he's a sexual 4 because it's all about wanting the ideal and becoming furious when things were not the way he wanted. So it's an unhealthy expression of the 4, 6, 8, of the sexual 4, 6, 8.
It's finally a dictator that doesn't get slapped with an 8 symbol.
Oh,
like every time I hear
Milosevic was a 3. There are a lot that were. Everyone was slapped with 8. Now, having said that, there are a lot of 8.
I believe it.
Because they're good at forming cohorts.
Yeah.
They're usually social 8. But yeah, and there are a lot of 2s that were made 4s, like Lana Del Rey. I could go into that whole thing because people don't realize, because they're not looking at the defense strategy used.
Right.
Looking at the behavior. But 4, 5, 8's really intellectual, and they want to talk about, the great books.
They're comfortable with darker things too, right? Like they're really comfortable with darker, like
Content and
they're okay with the negative.
I think that any 8 is okay with the negative. Because the humor of 8 is sardonic.
Well,
So you're turning things upside down. But the 4, 5, 8 is more like, my data is more accurate than yours. They're good debaters. The 3, 6, 8 and the 4, 5, 8 are excellent debaters, and they're usually quick talking, speaking. They're very fast, quick processor, and they have that emotional energy to talk about their position in a way. But both types stirred up, and that's what can be
confusing to others,
and they like it.
They do like it.
Thought that eights
But it's-
like to be in conflict. That's not true.
No, I don't.
Eights
I don't.
are just not going to back away from conflict.
Yeah.
And that's a very different understanding of eight.
We talk a little bit this on the podcast. We talk about how we always say we don't care. But the truth is not that we don't care. The truth is that we do care. It's just not going to stop us from doing what we feel is right or the thing we're going to do, right?
We really care. In fact, when I work with an 8 new, and they'll always say, I don't care, it doesn't matter. I go, yeah, another fairy tales. That's what we tell ourselves. But actually,
Totally. I know.
Yeah.
we do care.
We do.
But you have to be another 8 to say that. It doesn't
Totally.
work with the other types because you have to do nonchalant.
Yeah.
Definite, but nonchalant.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between those that misidentify as 8 and actual 8s. There's just a confidence that doesn't need to be pushed
Right.
out.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like, yeah.
And in fact, I think a lot of times we push others forward. Right?
In what way? Helping them, you mean?
In terms of like,
answer them and they won't.
no, I mean, in terms of like, when I am responsible for a group of people, I am looking for the people that are needed in the positions that are needed. And then I make myself the smallest in the room, right? Like that's my goal, is to bring everybody else's.
But why do you need to be small? Why couldn't you just be neutral?
Okay, so maybe it's neutral. It's not that I'm small. Yeah, I'm probably just more neutral. I don't need to take all the credit. I'll own what's mine. I have no problem owning what's mine, but I don't need to own all of it. And when we come together, it's never going to be all mine when there's multiple people working together, right? So
right.
I might have the vision and I might create the group, but at the end of the day, I've just started something that everybody's contributed to.
Yeah. Well, just like me teaching personal empowerment in the cosmetic industry, the 8 is going to do what they think will
benefit what is theirs
put
to do.
people so they're not disadvantaged.
Yes.
Because the 8 protects the underdog. So however the 8 goes about doing that is their own style.
Mm-hmm.
Like one 8 I was working with from Australia, she said there are 2 types of weak people. And it was like there's 2 types. So I'm just saying that. And the first type is the person that has a handicap or an illness or something, and they need help. She said she was 100% there. I wish I could do the Aussie accent with it. She said, and then there's this other type of weakness where it's cultivated and manipulating, and they're not weak. And she says, with them, I kind of just want to push them into the
sandbox. Yeah.
And in Australia, they don't like the tall poppies. They do this. Yeah, we cut off the tall poppies. 3s hate it there because they want to
feed the tall poppy. That's right.
Whereas the US is a very social 3-7-1 culture. So our founding fathers, very puritanical, very one-ish. All our government agencies are very self-pres one. But our need for 31 flavors of ice cream or mustard, that's all 7.
Yeah.
Boy, do we have a lot of variety and choice and options. But we see ourselves as the best and captains of industry, and we believe it. And the way we look to other countries is that we're all, hey, look at me. Hey, they make fun of us, actually, because when I've taught in other countries, they just say, yeah, you're 3.
So what do you think Canada is?
What's Canada's
9.
9. Yeah, that's us.
That's
so
the overall.
Usually, it doesn't feel like 9 living in it, right?
No, it doesn't feel 9 these days. But
yes,
I think you're right.
Comparatively speaking, the people kind of keeping to their own business and people not creating conflict is a value, is it not?
Yeah, it is.
You're right. Yep.
And I think we're always looking to see the other side. Like it's very
diplomatic, I guess.
And multiple sides, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Yeah, like I have clients that are Canadian. I also taught in Canada. And what I noticed is kind of the high side of 9, which is very accepting, very allowing. It was a wonderful intensive because everyone participated and it's not like in the US, 9s can pull away because there are those who move forward, like maybe too much. And they operated like a group, and there were 20 people. So it's not like it was tiny.
No, I would say that's pretty accurate. Like, I think one of the things we notice, and this will be speaking to the 3, is whenever we're down in the US, my brother lives in Nashville, we're in Florida frequently. And I always come home and it's so apparent, the wealth and the less than, right? Like, and you come home and we're all sort of in a big pot.
We can all wear sweatpants and messy buns and nobody cares.
Yeah, it's just so, and I have a lot of family in California too, right? And it's really different.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go on our podcast things, and I remember meeting a person over Zoom once, and I had said to Jo, like, it's just so different, right? Like we need, yeah, anyway.
It is. No, it really, really is. And then of course, each area has a tritype, like the Bay Area where I live now, very 5. Why? It came from all over the world, beginning in the 60s for the semiconductors. And it's attracted a lot of 5s or those with 5 in the tritype. Whereas I grew up in Newport Beach and we thought everyone was shallow, but we were beach born. I'm thinking, yeah, you guys, we're just as elitist as anywhere else. No, we're not. No, it's those other people. I go, we're all elitist about the beach.
The best oceans.
Yeah, our street is the best. We went to 54th Street. And then really the body surfing was better at 52nd. And we moved. I thought 54th Street was the best. And it was my boyfriend at the time, who was the counterphobic 631 social on crack. Very, very friendly guy. And he can get us all to go, okay, we'll go try it. He was always thinking something. And that's another misnomer, thinking that 6s can't lead or make a decision. They just don't like it when they're uncertain. Mm-hmm. Then all that comes up and you see the indecisiveness, but they usually save that for their nearest and dearest. But if it's a childhood group of friends from the time you're in kindergarten, they're going to know that you run anxiety. But, back to what each type does, the 6 conceals their fear because they don't want it used against them or to be discredited or not seen as smart. There's a lot of good reasons for it. The 8s conceal their kind of vulnerability, and we never use the word vulnerability, by the way. Not a single.
I don't like it. Yeah, we don't like it at all.
It isn't even in our vocabulary till we learn the Enneagram.
Yeah.
So if you say to someone, like when I started working on myself Enneagrammatically, I said, wait, time out. I was being vulnerable and no one noticed. and they said, oh, well, I feel that way all the time. I go, I don't. And I learned the most important thing is that for each type, it's when we start doing what's not natural for us, people don't notice.
No, my word for vulnerability is gross. So I'm like, I feel gross. And then I know I'm being vulnerable.
Yeah, or pathetic. I'll say, that's pathetic.
I use pathetic a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that we can say is, I usually say weak and pathetic.
Weak, that's what I just said, yeah.
Weak is fine with us, but the word vulnerable, all plastered on to type 8. But having said that, it's another way that people mistype, because if they know they're vulnerable, then they think, oh, I'm an 8. But 8s never use it.
Yeah. So
unless they're teaching the Enneagram.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I remember when we started looking into it and both of us are like, I don't think that's true.
Yeah. We were in denial. So much denial. So much.
Denial's a good thing at times.
I was like, I'm not angry.
I feel all my feelings. I really do. No,
but do you let those tender emotions in?
No. I don't know. They're words. Feelings are just words. They don't go out past the glow out my mouth.
Yeah, they kind of are intellectualized rather or instinctual, but letting them actually feel the heart. Because as an overall understanding of 8, it is act think, feel. Now, some people actually have act, think, feel. I do. So that's why I'm 8, then 7, then 4. But if someone's an 8, 4, 7, they're act, feel, think.
I
Right.
think I'm sure I'm that. Because
Seems
I
like
resonate far more with feeling than I do with thinking, and my thinking is harder to access.
it seems like it.
Yes.
In talking with you and
Yeah.
your body language and gestures,
what I
rather
identify.
than the thinking second.
Yeah.
When the 7 is second with 8, there's a greater voracious need for the new, the novel, the changing. And actually the whole tritype, especially if you lead with 7, is the most progressive tritype. So no one ever knows where they're going. And they're always a vanguard of whatever they're doing, regardless of the order. I will say that. But if someone leads with 7, then they're the vanguard of vanguards. And people aren't really supportive because they don't get it yet. And
Right.
when 8 is in the lead, the 8 is pointing out the weakness in any group, system, in everything, actually. It could be material, it could be.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I'm so grateful.
Yeah, it was lovely talking to you guys.
This is
So
This has
wonderful.
been such an asset. to
So
our community and
grateful
to us.
for all of it.
Is there
Excellent.
anything you want to say to our 8s before we sign out?
Oh, just to, well, I think the most important thing for 8s is to teach people in their lives that if you've hit that point of kind of conflict, that you need to tell people you don't like conflict either. But if you feel like you're misrepresented, you'll be conflictual, even if you think you're not. And so it's a matter of teaching those in our lives that we don't want the conflict. Let's look at a third perspective that involves yours, mine, and becomes ours. And that it's hard, but telling people that we're far more sensitive than we're willing to let on. And just because we don't talk emotional words and we don't act in an emotional way doesn't mean we're not feeling them intensely. Because that's universal. Because 8s cried louder, played harder, everything was amplified, including the feeling. So that part is true.
Yeah.
But it's more sharing that with people. And if you start to grow and change, tell people you're not rejecting them. You're just not taking over and taking charge and fixing things. But some people won't like it.
I will attest to
What
that.
happened? Where's
in my life.
where did you
just
go?
run everything, and now you don't do anything. And what do you mean? Like, and I'm like, well, I'm just waiting for someone else to step up now. And they're like, what do you mean? That's your job.
Yeah, and we taught them that.
Right? We did.
We taught everyone that we'll take charge. We'll handle it.
Yeah.
All righty.
Well, thank you so much.
Nice meeting you guys.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.